I am super excited to be here this morning and to be able to have the privilege and opportunity to speak in front of you all today. And I appreciate the introduction. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight, well, a couple of things I wanted to highlight is I would not be who I am today or where I am today if it had not been for my participation in athletics from the time I was probably 6 years old. So from the time I was 6 up until about the age of 25, I played football, basketball, baseball, tried soccer. They put me at goalie, big shock. I was a big body and kind of covered up most of the goals. It didn't have anything to do with hand-eye coordination or anything else. I just took up a lot of space. Realized really quickly that wasn't going to be the sport for me, but I'm so fired up and excited that Dr. Seeley and the other individuals who have helped create this Strong Youth project are doing what they're doing, because it is such an important part of life and wellness and an important part of my experience and kind of what helped shape me and lead me to where I am today. I wouldn't be standing here before you, though, if it hadn't been for, I was talking to Carol, who's helping out with the filming, that it takes a village, right? Like, we don't just become who we are just because of being us, right? Like, it takes a lot of people around us. It takes a lot of support, a lot of people believing in us to be able to accomplish the things that we are able to accomplish. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a lot of people that believe in me and support in me. And so I know there's all the accolades, there's all the letters, there's all the this and that, the Ph.D., the masters, all the publications, but my greatest accomplishments and the thing that brings me the most joy and fulfillment is my wife, Rachel, who I refer to as my better 7/8. It used to be 3/4, but I realized I was giving myself too much credit with that. And my children. I started off the parenthood journey with twins, Hudson and Hadley, and that was a very interesting time of life. My first semester of my master's program up at Utah State is when my wife delivered twins, and then our cute little almost 2-year-old Chloe. So today we're going to talk about most of my clinical work and my training was clinical mental health, but most of my research and the work that I've done the last 5 or 6 years has been almost exclusively with elite level athletes. So whether that's collegiate, professional, high achieving high school athletes, or even high achieving youth athletes. And so that's really where my passion is being in the mental health and performance space with athletes. And so I think it's helpful to start off with a definition. So we talk about mental performance, we hear mental performance, but what is mental performance? And typically I like to have people volunteer so they don't just have to hear me talk for 30 straight minutes, but I know that's going to kind of screw things up with the recording. So I'll go ahead and just read the definition. So mental performance is the development and application of mental skills, attitudes, perspectives, strategies, and processes that lead to optimal performance, well-being, and personal growth. So I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty cool to me. Developing mental skills, attitudes, perspectives, strategies, processes that can lead to optimal performance, well-being, and personal growth. Not only as an athlete, but in any capacity that you are currently operating in life. And today, my hope is that we can go through some of those skills, some of those attitudes and perspectives and strategies that can help you develop into the most optimal version of you. Okay, so why is it important? Why do we care about mental performance or mental health? So I want you to think about, I know that we have kind of a variety of individuals in here. We have some people that look like they might be youth athletes, some individuals who might be parents of an athlete, some individuals who might coach youth athletes. But I want you to think about your sport or the sports that you participate in or that you oversee. And I want you to think of this question. So if you had to put a number to it, what percentage of your sport or sports would you say is mental? Anyone want to raise their hand and throw out a number?
Probably 50-50.
Probably 50-50?
Cross-country skiing is mine.
Cross-country and skiing, okay.
Cross-country skiing.
Oh, cross-country skiing. I was going to say cross-country and skiing, but cross-country skiing, okay. So 50-50? Anyone else have any other thoughts?
80%.
80%. Anyone else? 95%. I should have prefaced, there is no right answer. So you guys are okay to just speak freely. And this is a judgment-free zone, okay? So 95%, 50%, 85%. So I ask this with all the sport teams that I work with, and the range typically is 50% on the low end and then 100% on the high end. Now, even though I'm biased, and it would behoove me and be in my benefit to suggest that yes, sport performance is 100% mental, the reality is it's not. You do have to have a certain level of physical skills and tool sets to be able to perform. However, I have seen many athletes, and myself included, and that's how I got into this space, where you have all the physical skills and abilities in the world, but mentally you're a train wreck, you are not going to be able to perform optimally. And that is something that I really struggled with. And I waited way too long in my career before I went and met with a mental performance specialist so that I could kind of figure out that aspect of my game. So now we recognize that it's an important part of our sport, right? Whether it's 50% or 90%, we all can agree that it's an important part of sport performance. So now I want you to think about how often do you actually spend deliberately and intentionally focusing on the mental side of sport and developing those mental skills so that you can perform optimally. So usually when I start this conversation, it's crickets, right? It's like, wow, like we really, we talk about it, we recognize it's important, but like we really don't do a whole lot to cultivate the mental side of our sport. And I think that that's partly because a lot of people, A, don't realize that they're doing it already just by certain things that they're doing, and B, because they just don't know how. And so we're going to talk about some of those things. I don't want to bore you to death with the research, but I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't at least highlight some of these important statistics that we are aware of when it comes to mental health of youth and young adults. So this research is a little outdated, but you can see between the years 2016 and 2019, the jump in major depressive disorder among 12 to 17-year-olds and 18 to 25-year-olds. I mean, that's pretty alarming numbers, 30% increase for both 12 to 17 and 18 to 25-year-olds. You can see anxiety disorder, 33%, 1 in 3 people. 1 out of every 3 12 to 17-year-old has some sort of anxiety disorder. And then close to 20%, same thing with major depressive disorder. And then this one, the last one, is probably the most alarming, a 44% increase in ER visits, children under 18 for mental health reasons, specifically 2019 to 2020. This one's specific to teenagers. This is looking at persistent thoughts or feelings of sadness or hopelessness. So persistent. That means constantly, all the time. Sadness or hopelessness among US high school students by sex between 2011 and 2021. Look at the jump, especially for our female students. 36% in 2011, up to almost 60% in 2021. And then for male students, 21% 2011, up to almost 30%. This is part of my research, and what I spent a lot of my time during my dissertation looking at was mental health specifically with NCAA student athletes. But we know that almost one out of every 3, or 33%, of NCAA student athletes experience moderate to severe anxiety symptoms. Mental health and relationship problems has been recognized as the #1 concern for student athletes for the past 5 years straight now. So it's no surprise that Division I universities are now required to have an in-house mental health professional within the athletic department because it's such a huge issue. Dr. Seeley talked a little bit about this in his welcome address, but there's an interesting correlation between mental health and injury. So there are studies that show that people who preseason have higher levels of anxiety and depression are way more likely to get injured during season than those who don't have high levels of depression and anxiety. And this is one of the things that I'm passionate about, is trying to change this statistic. So of the athletes that are struggling with mental health issues, only 10% of those individuals actually reach out and seek the help that they need. And men, and especially football men, are probably the worst offenders. And I experience that myself firsthand, and I experience being in a locker room with a lot of guys where it's like, man, feelings and emotions, we don't go there. We're just big, tough guys, right? So we talked about what mental performance is. We talked about why it's important. We've highlighted kind of the current trends of some of the struggles that we're experiencing with youth population and young adult population with mental health. So what do we do now? Does anybody know what this is from? Am I too old that I'm the only one that knows the TV show? Anybody? Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold, let's go. One of the best. So this is topic number one, or take home number one. So this is one of my studies that is going to be the final study I'm going to get published for my dissertation research. But first and foremost is to remember that before we're athletes and before we're these like superhero type figures that we kind of look up to, we're human beings. And to be a human being means that you're going to have a lot of feelings, emotions, and thoughts that come up. Sometimes there's a trigger and a reason, and sometimes there's no reason at all. And sometimes they're a lot more complex and challenging and difficult, and sometimes they're not as complex and challenging and difficult. And as athletes, there's generally a stigma around mental health, which is I can't have mental health issues because that makes me weak, or I can't talk about mental health issues because that means that I'm soft or that there's something wrong with me. And what I found in my research is that it's actually the opposite, that if people view mental health as not a weakness but just part of the human experience, that you're less likely to have depression, anxiety, and stress, and that those athletes who are more willing, this is a sample of almost 500 NCAA student athletes from across the country, those who are more willing and open to talk about their mental health issues also have lower levels of depression, anxiety, and stress. So that's going to be my first challenge, is challenge the way that you think about mental health and what that says about you, and consider what these findings mean for you and how that might change how you view mental health and how you talk about it and address it. Okay, let's see if I can remember how to do the little swipe motion here. So I have a video that I wanted to show.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Okay, so I don't know about you, but when I watch that video, that is very comforting and reassuring. And I was actually showing it as a little preview earlier, and the comment was made, like, that's actually really refreshing to know that, like, my brain can still change. Because sometimes we hear that, you hear the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until you're 25 years old. And so you kind of think, like, oh, once I get to age 25, like, that's kind of the end of the road for my brain development and my ability to change. But the reality is that our brain has the constant ability to change, and there are things that we can do specifically within our control that can kind of help fire some of those new and create some of those new neural pathways. I show this video. It doesn't matter if it's a swimmer, a diver, football player, gymnast, basketball player, musician. This is one of the first videos I show every athlete that I work with to help them understand that your brain has the ability to change, and there are things that you can do specifically to help that process. And so that's takeaway number 2 is that our brains can change. And by us fostering, I'm sure we've all heard of this by now, and if you haven't, this will be your first exposure to it, but this idea of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So growth mindset is the idea that with practice and with consistency and with effort, I have the ability to get better at something. A fixed mindset is I am who I am and there's no really changing it, so what's the use of trying? But if we allow ourselves to realize that, hey, you know what? Failure is a huge part of the process. And in fact, it's an expected part of the process. I'm supposed to fail at things because that's how I get better, that's how I learn, that's how I improve. But we have to be intentional about that, right? And so I want to challenge you in this room, whether you're an athlete, a parent, a coach, to think about how you say things. We're going to talk a little bit more about the power of what we say and the words that we use and how that can affect us mentally and emotionally. But one of the things that I do as a parent and a mental performance person is kind of an interesting combo with my kids. I think they roll their eyes at me at this point. But I hear my daughter say all the time, like, oh, I can't do it, or this is just too hard. And every time I hear her say that, I say, yet. I can't do it yet. And then I say, but, and then she says, but if I keep practicing and I stay consistent, I know that I'll get better. And I know that it sounds cheesy, but it's so important to add that small yet profound word of yet. Or this is too hard right now, but I know that if I stick with it and I keep giving full effort and have a good attitude about it, that things can change. Okay, so in true BYU fashion, and I have one of my former professors here back in the day when I was here doing my studies at BYU, we're gonna have an unexpected pop quiz, okay? Bright and early when no one wants to do it. So here's the scenario. I want you to imagine that you work in a large organization of about 500 employees. Tomorrow, you are scheduled to give a 30-minute keynote speech in front of the whole company, including the CEO and executive board. This makes you feel extremely anxious. So I want you to think about that for a second. You're about to go stand in front of 500 people, including the CEO and executive board of your company, and you have to give a 30-minute keynote speech. Not a whole lot different than what I'm doing right now. So here's the first question. It's multiple choice, okay? So you have a chance. What is the best advice for you in this situation? And again, this is a judgment-free zone. So everyone, I would love for you to participate, and there is not necessarily a right or wrong answer. So here are the options. Option A, try to relax and calm down. Option B, try to cancel the speech or find someone else to do it. Full disclosure, that is generally where I jump to. When it comes to giving a presentation or doing something, speaking in front of people, I commit to doing it, and then I start going through all the reasons why I don't want to do it, why I shouldn't do it, and all the reasons I could bail. Which, by the way, when you understand why the way that our brains work and the way that our brains are wired, that is its number one job is to keep us safe and to protect us from threats. And so when you're about to go speak in front of 50 people or 500 people, that's a threat to your ego, and it could be embarrassing. You could say something really stupid. So by design, your brain's gonna say, oh no, we don't wanna do that. We wanna avoid that at all costs. And so sometimes you gotta lean into it. So option C is try to be excited instead of anxious. Okay, so think about it for just a couple of seconds. And I'm gonna have you raise your hand. I'm gonna take note of who raises their hand and who doesn't raise their hand. So, given the situation, the scenario, given a speech, what is the best advice in this situation? Who would say option A, try to relax and calm down? Okay, who would go with option B, try to cancel the speech or find someone else to do it?
I feel like I would, but I also know that's not the right answer.
Yes. So the comment was, I feel like I would, but I also know that's not the right answer. And I appreciate that. Thank you for the comment. Okay, what about option C, try to be excited instead of anxious? Man, we got a bunch of smart people in this room. Okay, so this is the second part of the pop quiz. So I'm gonna read off two different definitions of a physiological phenomenon that we experience, okay? And you have to decide if it's anxiety or excitement. So here's option one. A high arousal emotional state characterized by increased heart rate, perspiration, restlessness, and stomach butterflies. I'll give you option 2 and then we'll decide which one is which. Option 2, a high arousal emotional state characterized by increased heart rate, perspiration, restlessness, and stomach butterflies. So some of you are laughing, some of you are looking at me like this, like, is this dude serious? This was intentional. Yes, you have a comment?
Definitely number 2.
Definitely number 2. So the reality is when you look at anxiety, and I'm not talking about clinical anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder, I'm talking about just trait levels of anxiety or state levels of anxiety kind of in the moment, before a performance, or excitement, right? When you feel really excited about something. On paper, from a physiological perspective, they are the exact same thing. It is very difficult to tell the difference between the two. So, how do we know which one we're experiencing? If physiologically we're having the same sensations, we have increased heart rate, we start sweating more, we start having this butterfly feeling in our stomach, how do we know if we're feeling excited or if we're feeling anxious? The question was, is it just the way you're thinking about it? And the answer is, that is exactly what it is. It's our cognitive appraisal or our interpretation of that experience is what dictates how that's going to affect us. And there's some really cool research that was done that kind of supports this exact thing. So this woman out of Harvard back in 2013 wanted to look at the power of words and this concept of reframing anxiety as excitement and see how that would affect performance in 3 different tasks that generally cause a lot of nervousness or anxiety for participants. So the first study and the first task was singing karaoke. And so they had participants that they divided into 2 groups. And one of the groups they had say out loud, and I'd be happy to send you the study so you can actually look at the procedures of how they did it. And they encouraged the participants to really try to believe it. Like when you say this statement, really try to believe it. So they had one group read the statement, I'm excited. And they had the other group read the statement, I am anxious. And then they went and sang on the Wii karaoke, Don't Stop Believin'. Just a small town girl. One of the greatest songs ever. And they had judges that they brought in that had no idea what was going on with the study. They were independent judges who had no idea. And what they found is the participants that said, I'm excited, that's all they did was say, I'm excited, were rated as more confident and had greater singing accuracy and better outcomes than those who said, I'm anxious. Study number 2, public speaking, right? Most of Americans' number 1 fear is speaking in public. Okay, so it's something that induces that sense of butterflies, increased heart rate, et cetera. Same thing, except they wanted to say, okay, instead of saying I am anxious, what if we try to go the opposite and go from like this physiological heightened state of arousal to a lesser state of arousal and being calm? And what they found in this study is that those that said I am excited, again, were rated as more persuasive, competent, confident, and persistent. And then finally, they did a difficult math task. Now, if you're like my 9-year-old daughter, they had the state testing this past week, and she was a train wreck about it, so nervous about it, and so anxious. So a lot of people, when it comes to doing math tests, it's kind of an anxiety-producing thing. There was a little switch up in this one. Instead of saying, I am excited, they had someone, like a coach or a teacher, say, okay, can we generate the same thing to tell someone to get excited versus try to stay calm, right? What's one of the first things we try to do when people are freaking out? Just calm down. Well, this study would suggest that that's not the most effective approach, right? What they found is that the people who were told to try to get excited again achieved higher scores, reported greater confidence, and it primed an opportunity mindset versus a threat mindset. So opportunity mindset is I'm viewing this as what a cool opportunity that I get to go do this versus like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be so hard, I don't know if I should do this. And the opportunity mindset and embracing it as a challenge and something that could be beneficial was what allowed them to perform better on the task. Okay, so this is just kind of the take home from the author of the study. My findings demonstrate the profound control and influence we have over our own emotions. The way we verbalize and think about our feelings helps to construct the way we actually feel. Saying I'm excited or encouraging others to get excited represents a simple Minimal intervention that can be used quickly and easily to prime an opportunity mindset and improve performance. So the way that we talk about things, the way that we interpret things matters. Okay, so if we go back to this question, you guys are already all over it. Interesting in her study, and granted this was 10 years ago, 90% of the participants went with option A, try to calm down. They thought that would be the best way for them to perform their best, was to try to calm down. But you all are a lot smarter than that group, I guess, because you guys were all over it. Okay, so in the literature, I know this is really difficult to see, but at the very top, this was a recent meta-analysis and systematic review of all of the different sports psychology interventions and variables, and they wanted to look at which ones had the greatest positive effect on sport performance and which variables had the greatest negative effect on sport performance. And what they found is that mindfulness, which is at the very top, had a very large effect and the greatest effect, more so than anything else. So task cohesion, confidence, pressure training, all these different things, mental practice, self-talk, etc. And so what is mindfulness? We saw a small video clip in the main conference room about kind of the essence of mindfulness, which is paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. That's John Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness, and he's kind of the mindfulness guru. So paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So how do we actually do that? One of the things that I do with my athletes is whatever room we're sitting in or whatever environment we're in, I have them just notice what's in the room. Like take, for example, this room. There's a fire alarm, there's light switches, there's a TV, you guys have your own phones, you guys have water bottles, you have pamphlets, you got a piano, right? There's 100 different things, 1,000 different things in this room that we could pay attention to. We could sit and stare at these ceiling panels and this little circle thing up there, right? But most of you, some of you are falling asleep in here, and that's okay. I usually do that. Most of you are paying attention to me and what I'm saying and the stuff that I have on the screen. Does that mean that everything else disappears and that it's not there anymore? No, it means that you're so focused on one specific thing that everything else kind of just becomes background noise, and that is one way that you can train mindfulness. Another way is to focus on your breathing. That's something that's always within our control that we can always focus on, is feeling the sensation of the breath going inside of our body and a breath coming outside of our body. And just something as simple as that, noticing when your mind drifts in a non-judgmental way, so it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about, eating blocks dessert again after this, and I shouldn't be thinking about that when I'm, trying to give a presentation. It's like, oh, I noticed I'm thinking about that. That's not really helpful for me in this moment, so I'm going to redirect my focus to something that's more helpful in this moment. Okay. How are we doing on time?
We're great, we're fantastic.
Okay, perfect. All right, here's another thing that you guys can take home, and I talk about this with all the athletes that I work with and all the teams that I work with, is the 5 Ps of confidence. So the first one, this one's pretty obvious and pretty intuitive, present performance, right? If I'm out there playing basketball and I'm making a lot of shots and I'm making free throws and I'm getting buckets, right, I'm feeling pretty confident in my ability to play basketball. But the problem is how we are currently playing in the present is not always the best or most accurate indicator of our ability and what we're capable of doing. So the second P is past accomplishments or past performance, right? Sometimes we have to reflect on what I've been able to do in the past, even if I'm playing like crap or things aren't going the way I want them to go right now. So take, for example, Steph Curry. Do we got any Steph Curry fans in here? I'm a big Steph Curry fan. Any Steph Curry haters in here? It's okay, you guys can raise your hands. I know it's usually kind of mixed. So I love Steph Curry first and foremost because he was doubted from the very beginning. No one ever thought that he would be who he is today. And I love that about him because he decided that he wasn't going to let other people's opinions or thoughts about him define who he was able to be. But Steph Curry is going to go down as probably, or he is currently, the greatest three-point shooter to ever play the game of basketball. When you think about that, like that's a pretty cool accomplishment. Greatest three-point shooter to ever play. But there are nights where Steph Curry goes 1 for 11 from the three-point line. 1 for 11. That sucks. I could probably do that right now. Probably not, but maybe. Depends on the day. Does that mean that he should stop shooting threes and never shoot threes again? No, it just means it's one night and it's not reflective of his overall ability to shoot the basketball. And so what does he do? Oh, it's just an off night. I'm gonna get back into the gym and keep shooting, right? The third P is preparation. It's the old saying, right? If you fail to prepare, you can prepare to fail. There's nothing that beats doing, right? Like I can't expect, I'm gonna challenge myself there. I love when people say I can't because I always respond with, well, actually you can, but you're choosing not to for a reason. I used to expect to go out and play golf, and I expected myself to hit just pure solid contact shots all the time. And when I wouldn't hit good golf shots and I'd shank the ball over the golf course, I'd get really mad. And I'd throw clubs and I'd get frustrated. And then I'd kind of take a step back and it's like, dude, why are you so frustrated? You golf like 3 times a year, and it's one of the most difficult sports ever. Like even professional golfers hit bad golf shots, and you're out here thinking that you should just because you want to, come out and hit good golf shots. But the bottom line is I didn't put the preparation that was required to be able to expect myself to hit those golf shots. So you have to put in the work, you have to prepare. Power statements. So this is another one, right? And we learned through the research, so this isn't just some fluffy thing to say, that there's actual research that shows that what you say to yourself and how you say it has a huge impact on your emotions and your feelings, and especially when it comes to confidence. I was the worst as a football player here at just beating myself up. And it's because we're all wired to go to the negative. So research shows we have between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day on average. And I've talked about this with my wife. She knows that I share this, so I'm not throwing her under the bus. That's an average, right? So my wife probably has like 100,000 thoughts per day, and I probably have close to 1,000 thoughts on a good day, right? But it averages out. And there's also research that shows that of those thoughts, 80% are negative in nature. So we're kind of like, we have to work against the inherent wiring of our brain to go from beating ourselves up, being critical, thinking of the negative, to thinking of things that are going to be more helpful in the moment, which is, I got this. This is my time. I'm going to make it happen today. Or focusing on specific things like effort, attitude, have fun. It is amazing to me when I sit with the athletes that I work with on the football team, and it doesn't matter, football player, gymnast, swimmer, diver, basketball player, when I ask them to describe what they are thinking, what they are feeling, what it's like when they are performing at their best, without fail, the top 3 answers are, I am fully present and just enjoying the moment, I'm having fun, and I believe in myself. Those 3 things. And so then we formulate those into cues, right? Because focusing on having fun, believing in myself, and being present is a lot less intimidating and a lot less pressure-filled than I have to stick this landing, or I can't drop a pass, or I can't get beat, which is how I played as an offensive tackle for most of my career. So afraid to get beat. Instead of the opposite of, okay, let's not focus on what you don't want to have happen. Let's focus on what can you do within your control that's going to put you in a position to win the rep, and can you focus on those 1 or 2 or 3 things. And then the 5th one is purpose. So purpose is twofold. So the first part of purpose is connecting what you're doing to something bigger, greater, and to a higher purpose. And it's one of my favorite quotes. When we change the way we view what we do, how we do what we do changes. Right? So a perfect example, I had a younger brother who walked onto the football team my sophomore year. He was a tight end. He tore his ACL during spring ball. And that whole season, I played the season with his initials, TB number 12. Not Tom Brady, I'm not that cool, but TB 12. And for me, when I'm on the field and I'm feeling tired and I'm in my feels because I just had a bad play or a bad rep, I'd look down and I'd see TB 12, and in my mind I'd think, man, Trevor would kill to be out here right now. He would love to be playing on this football field. And so because I was able to connect what I was doing to something greater than me and a greater purpose, that helped fuel me to, snap out of it and play better. So that's part 1 of purpose. The other part of purpose is remembering that your purpose is not 100% dependent on your ability to perform as an athlete or grades you get in school or how you are as a parent, unless you allow it to be. As athletes, it is so easy to get caught up in my worth and my value is 100% tied to my performance. And the challenge with that is, and we're going to look at a little, an image, I'll jump to it right now. The challenge of that is buckle up, because it's not a matter of if, but when performance dips or when something doesn't go well, if your value and your worth as a human being is tied 100% to that, that is going to be a rough roller coaster. Versus identifying other sources of confidence, other things in my life that give me purpose and meaning and that are fulfilling to me, so that when I have dips in performance, when I don't do as well on a test that I want to do, like it doesn't completely crash everything about me. And I love this. So Stephen Hauschka, he was a 13-year NFL kicker, and he has the record for most consecutive made 50-yard plus field goals, and he's one of the most accurate kickers to ever play in the NFL. There was a reporter that asked him, like, what's your headspace? And I will tell you right now that working with the football team, being a kicker, as far as like when it comes to being mentally prepared, that is probably one of the most difficult positions on the football field. Very similar to golf, right? It is a very mental thing. And so they asked him, what is your headspace before you go out and kick a big kick or a game-winning kick? And I loved his answer. He said, when I'm out there before a big kick, I'm not really thinking, I'm just breathing. So again, he's going to mindfulness, right? I'm just allowing myself to be present where I am, focusing on things that are within my control. I know it's important for the team. I want to make it, and that's important to me, but I realize I don't need to make the kick to be more than I am right now. I already feel whole. I don't feel like there's anything to lose. That helps me play free. When you can accept that and identify and appreciate that sport is something that you do and it's not something that you are, and I know that that's difficult. I lived that life for about 10 years. I connected so much of my identity and so much of my value to my ability to play sports. But at some point, whether it's after getting injured and having to retire, or it's you decide to end sport, or a sport ends for you, you're going to have to figure out like there's more to life than whatever sport you participate in. So you can develop those skills now and identify now, what are some of those other things that I can derive confidence from that have nothing to do with my performance as an athlete or a cross-country skier, right? I didn't mean to separate those two. Cross-country skiers are athletes, 100%. Okay. So just, are we out of time? Okay, I was going to end with one quote. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it's the final challenge to each of you. So the quote says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So in closing, that's my challenge to you. I know we hear it from a doctrinal perspective, whether you're religious or not. My challenge to you is to live big, use your own unique gifts, talents, God-given abilities, and let your light shine, and allow it to shine on other people as well. Okay. We're to questions. That is a good reminder. Thank you. You can ask me any question at all. Go ahead.
The question that I have is a matter of conscious thought and subconscious. I don't want to say subconscious thought, but just your subconscious. And the perspective I'm going with is a lot of athletes, if they just do it without thinking about it, But the minute they start to think about the act and they become over analytic, forget the tennis player, Andre Agassi, I think, had a problem where they just had to get him to stop thinking and just do. What are your perspectives on that as it pertains to improving performance when somebody starts to overthink something that they can just do, but for some reason their mind grabs hold and says, I gotta think through this act instead of just doing it, letting your subconscious counteract it.
That's a fantastic question, and I'll try to do my best to repeat the question. So basically, the essence of the question is, how do you combat the subconscious drive to overthink things as an athlete versus kind of just allowing yourself to do what you've trained yourself to do, right? And that is something that I talk to athletes about all the time. And I think it goes back to where you're placing your focus. Like if I'm placing my focus on outcomes, then that is going to be a lot different than placing my focus on process-related things that are within my control. So going back to when you're at your best, and that's a question you could ask your athlete as a coach, as a parent, is what are some of the things that you're thinking or doing or feeling when you're at your best? And can we remember that so that you can have those cues now when you're out there and your brain wants to take over and wants to jump in and go to overdrive mode and protect you, because that's really all that it's doing, is now you can be very intentional and deliberate about where you're placing that focus and placing it on something that is just be me. Like that's a text I send every athlete that I work with before a gymnastics meet, football game, whatever. Where's your focus? And I do that specifically because if they can't narrow their focus down onto one or two simple things or specific things, then you allow yourself to get carried away by the moment and all the feelings, thoughts, and emotions that are going to happen, right? Because it's a big thing, it's a big moment, it's a big environment. And so again, it's kind of the mindfulness approach of recognizing that and not trying to push it away, but saying, oh, I notice that my brain's all over the place. What's the most helpful thing in this moment to focus on that's gonna help me be my best? And usually for some people, it's fascinating though, because I've worked with a lot of gymnasts, and I would say, I love working with gymnasts because I think they are elite when it comes to both the combination of physical and mental ability, because they are literally, if they have a missed turn or they lose focus, like it's a matter of like breaking their neck and becoming paralyzed, right? And so many of the gymnasts I work with have like a cue for every single thing that they're doing on the beam. Like they're thinking about every single moment. And it's not it's not my place to tell them like that's not helpful. You're an N of one, you gotta figure out what works best for you. But then there are some gymnasts where they're literally singing the lyrics to the song that's playing as they're doing their routine, and they're not thinking about anything other than just doing what they've trained their body to do over and over and over again 100 times. So I think a lot of it's individual and figuring out for that athlete what is most helpful, but kind of helping them work through that process of what's the most helpful thing for you to focus on that's within your control that's going to give you the best chance to perform to your best. Sorry, that was a long answer. Yeah, so when we change the way we view what we do, how we do what we do changes. So a perfect example, I wore this shirt today for a reason. The first reason is because my wife said she likes it on me. The second reason is because it was for Veterans Day or Memorial Day, I can't remember which one, but I have an uncle who is probably legitimately has maybe 2 or 3 days left of living on this earth. He has stage 4 lung cancer and he's a colonel in the Army. He served in the Army and he's a colonel. And I've been visiting with him a lot and just kind of, seeing him basically just waste away and suffer away. He weighs less than 90 pounds now and he's basically just a skeleton with skin on his body. And when I go work out, it's easy to kind of get into that mindset of like, man, this sucks, this is hard, like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I try to implement that quote to myself and it's like, man, like think of Uncle Rod. Like he would kill to be able to move his body and get up and walk around. And so just shifting that perspective, it goes from all of a sudden feeling like, oh, I can't do this to now like, I get to do this. I have the privilege to do this and what a cool opportunity it is. And it's all just because of a shift in perspective. It's no change physically in what's happening. It's all mindset related. Yeah, so the question was like raw discipline, and this sentiment that sometimes is about doing things that you don't necessarily want to do, but you do it anyway to kind of develop this discipline and resilient and grit muscle. And if there's a point where that becomes unhealthy, yes, there's a point that becomes healthy, and you're the one who has to decide that, right? But I had this conversation with one of our sports science guys for the football team, because we use a lot of data to inform our decisions now about how hard to push guys and what types of conditioning to do. And our guys kind of get caught up in so now like what's the purpose of this activity or this exercise or this workout, which is not inherently a bad question. But sometimes I want to say the answer is it's a great opportunity for you to get physically and mentally tougher, and that's it. Because it's hard and it's difficult. And how can you expect yourself to develop that toughness without doing things that are going to be difficult and you have to push yourself? And so I talk a lot about being values and discipline driven versus feelings driven, because if we allow our feelings to dictate everything that we do and don't do, again, buckle up, because that's a slippery slope, versus saying, I don't feel like doing this in the moment. And sometimes that might be the answer, is maybe I do need to take a rest day. Maybe I do need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. I was talking to one of the gymnasts the other day. She wants to keep working through a shoulder injury. And she's like, should I keep pushing through it? And it's like, well, what do you think? She's like, I think it'd probably be better for me to just get my shoulder ready so that then I can perform better throughout the rest of the summer. And I said, I think that's probably a wise decision. But then in her mind, it's like, but now I feel like I'm soft because I'm taking time off. But it's like, you have to think about the reasoning for taking the time off. So it's an individual thing, but the reality is, in order to become mentally tougher, you do have to push yourself to do things that you don't necessarily want to do all the time. And then as a result, you kind of develop that toughness and resilience and grit. You had a question. How much longer do we have?
Probably 1 or 2 more questions. 5 minutes.
Okay.
The question is, as a coach, when you have an athlete, especially a young athlete who's struggling with the confidence, how do you help them apply those 5 P's of confidence?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, as a coach, how do I help my athletes apply the 5 P's of confidence that we talked about? That's a great question. I think you can teach the framework. I keep doing that. I don't know what that is, but anyway. I think it's something that, and I'm happy to send you the framework, and that's something that you can just teach them and help them, because I think that it's more of an education piece of them understanding, like, okay, we talk about confidence, we talk about why it's important, but like, how do I actually generate confidence? And one of the things that I do is I have athletes, and I don't know if you have access to this, but having them put like a highlight tape together, or reflecting on like your best performance, or envisioning like you playing your best. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you actually doing? So that then it's one of those things where it's like, people think that I have to feel confident in order to be confident. But we learned from that study that even if you don't feel excited, just saying you're excited totally changes how you perform and how you do things. And so I use this example all the time with my athletes, and it gets kind of awkward sometimes because they think I'm actually going to have them do it. But I say, if I had to ask you to start acting like a dog right now in this room, could you do it? And they're like, I'm not going to have you act like a dog, but if you know what a dog is, you know what a dog does. Like if I asked you to give me your best dog impersonation, could you do it? And they're like, yeah, for sure. And then the question is, okay, so do you feel like a dog? And they're like, no, but you can act like a dog. And it's the same thing with confidence, right? Like I don't have to feel confident to act with confidence. And so I think that's an important lesson to help teach them too, is feelings don't always have to be in the driver's seat. We can think about, what do I feel like doing versus what needs to be done and what's going to be the most helpful thing for me to do in this moment. Good question.
Okay, so my question was sort of related to the subconscious way of thinking you were talking about in competition for the gymnasts. In my competitions, it's just, we want that. We all want the subconscious working, just sort of a flow state. Let's say I'm skiing along, something goes wrong, I slip, maybe not even a fall, my technique gets a little wonky, too much lactate in my muscles. How can I smoothly swap from the subconscious way of thinking to a conscious way of thinking to fix and address the problem without overthinking and messing up my whole rhythm?
That's a great question. I don't know if I'm going to be able to repeat the whole thing, but basically, so to answer your question though, is I think that's part of the preparation, because when we think of preparation, we think physical preparation, but also where there's a lot of value is mentally preparing and visualizing. And of course we want to visualize ourselves succeeding and doing things well, but also we know that as an athlete, that's not how it works, right? It's not just perfect and no mistakes and everything just goes great the whole time. Like, the reality is there is going to be times where adversity strikes and you have to decide in that moment, okay, what am I going to do in this? And if you can prepare beforehand to make that commitment, like, okay, if I do fall, this is what I'm going to commit to do. I'm going to get back up, I'm going to deal with the frustration, I'm going to use it as fuel to push me forward and focus on just driving and finishing, right? Things that are within your control. One or two things that you can focus on, or reframing that as like, of course it's easy to jump to like, man, that sucked, like how frustrating, how unfortunate, versus like, what a great opportunity for me to see what I got in the tank and to see what I can do after something unfortunate. So it's about the reinterpretation. So do we have one more? Or?
So this is all really good, and you work with elite athletes. How do we get this information to our little kids, our new athletes, get it to the masses so that before they get to elite status, it's already part of who they are?
That's a great question. You can take this video and share it with everybody, or you can reach out to me and I'm happy to come talk to, you know, whoever it is that you work with. But I think, did you have a comment or another question? But yeah, I think some of the things we talked about are things that you can just incorporate in how you talk to the kids that you're working with, and help them just from the very beginning understand the power of growth mindset. And just because something hard doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that it's hard and you can do hard things, and give them the opportunity to challenge themselves and make it through hard things and then process it. Like I hiked the Y Mountain with my twins, my son, so he's on the autism spectrum and he usually doesn't like, you know, being sweaty and outside and hot and whatever else. And he kept saying, Dad, I want to hike to the top of the Y Mountain. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking like, you say that, but no chance, you know? So finally I'm like, you know what, let's give him the chance. We drive up there, hike to the top of the Y Mountain. It was a disaster the first couple switchbacks. And they're like, I want to go home, this is too hard, my legs hurt. And I'm like, I know, like it's supposed to be hard, it's supposed to hurt. We can take our time and we'll just keep going to the top. And then we get to the top and I'm processing with my daughter Hadley. And I'm like, so what'd you think about that? She was like, that was horrible. And it was awesome. And I'm like, okay, so like what was the horrible part? Like all the hiking, it was so hard. And then what was the awesome part? The view at the top. And then processing like, isn't it so interesting that you had to go through the really hard, frustrating stuff to be able to enjoy and have that sense of fulfillment and satisfaction? Because now in her mind, she knows like, I can do hard things, even though my mind wants to try to avoid hard things. So that's just a small way, but yeah, I'm happy to give you my contact information. Well, he was just stoked to get to the top because he knew that once you got to the top, it was time to go back down and go get a treat or something. But so he went from me thinking zero chance he was going to make it to he made it to the top faster than anybody else. And I was like, man, joke's on me as a parent for, you know, putting that limit on my son to begin with. But anyway.